So stop buying properties right now. We are heading into a 70-year decline in the market, in the property market. If you've got any deals in legals, speak to your solicitor, phone them up now, tell them to stop that deal because we're heading towards a decline. Or are we? Look, what people say is the best indicator of the future is to study the past. But what a lot of people do is they study the past in short increments, in the recent past. So Ray Dalio talks about this a lot. If you've not seen how the economic cycle works, watch Ray Dalio's video here. It's a fantastic video, but he talks about long-term and short-term debt cycles, and according to him, we're towards the end of a long-term debt cycle. So does this mean what I've done here is I've took an article, what I've found, and some data from Schroders. I always get the pronunciation of that a bit mixed up. So an article from This Is Money, done an article based on Schroders' study of the last 174 years. So if you want to see what's going on in the last 174 years, and is the past definitely an indicator for the future? If it is, you definitely want to stop them deals, but I'm not quite sure it is going to be. So let's look into the data and see what we can take from that and how we can base our decisions going forward. Make sure you're hanging around the end, because I'm going to confirm if I am going to stop all my deals that I've got in legals tomorrow, or whether or not we're going to push forward, and what plans you want to take to push forward with that. But the best plan you can take right now is to smash that like button. Really helps the algorithms out, and it massively helps my ego. So let's get into this. So according to this article, it says, well, not according, this is actually facts and stats, right? So it says house prices have only ever been as expensive as they are today compared to wage twice in the past 120 years. And that might not surprise you. One of them times was the 2000s. Because I keep on going on about, look, when we have recessions, properties don't always crash. And I kept on saying, look, we're going to get a massive house price. Didn't say we're going to get that. I kept on saying that there's only been 2 major crashes. So I've been looking a bit more into the long term of this. And one of the major declines, especially in affordability. So that's where the real test is, the affordability. The price of an asset going up due to inflation is not the asset price going up. The affordability is the real test on how much you can afford. So well and good it being worth XYZ now. If your wages have followed that, that's a different thing. If they're not following it, again, it's a different thing. So again, in the 2000s, when we got that crazy run, when the banks were just throwing money at the door, that's when they went above. The long-term average has been about 8 times multiplier. So they've only been above that a few times, and every time they have been above that, we've had problems. And the first time they was above that, as you can see from this chart, we had a massive decline for a long period of time. They nearly got above it, as you can see from this chart, in the 1950s, but didn't quite get there. But even when we had the stagflation period in the 1970s, the property prices didn't hit a massive steep decline. But as I said, what you want to be doing is, everybody keeps on saying about the prices doubling, blah, blah, blah. The price per earnings ratio wasn't as wide back then, and they didn't pace up quite the same as they did. Look, if you zoom out, like Ray Dalio talks about, look at this chart here, and you zoom out, and it says, look, the Bank of England house price index from 1984 to 2016, and the property values barely shifted right up to the 1960s, and beyond them, normal prices rocketed on beyond after them. But up to then, it just was quite steady. So when we hit that steep decline, like, look, in the article it says, we think this 8 times wages is expensive now, but that was 13 times wages in the 1840s. And what the Victorians and Edwardians did to make that cheaper over the next 70 years was to build. And from the mid-18, you're always confusing me this. When they say the 19th century, they mean 1800s. When they say the 20th century, they mean the 1900s. For me, it would have been more simple to say the 19th century when it was the 1900s, but maybe in the comments somebody can explain why they do that. But anyway, we had a steep decline for 70 years in affordability rates. But there's a bigger part of this picture. Make sure you hang around, because there's a bigger part of this picture that adds to this and makes this very different for today. And it went on a multi-decade downturn, which only bottomed out after World War I, when we come to around the Great Depression time. And one of the ways they combat this, they went on the building boom. So more houses, smaller homes, and rising wages were the 3 major factors that drove almost 70 years of properties getting cheaper. What drove them getting cheaper over them time. It just kept on building, kept on producing more properties. So again, this is the answer. But can we do that in today's society? I know Liz Truss has just come in. If you want to see a video about Liz Truss and her policies, have a watch of this here. Don't forget, you can see these videos I suggest in the description, so you can carry on watching now and watch them later on. But Liz Truss is trying to push on this with a policy saying, look, we've got to do it from the bottom up, incentivise people. But can we really do that today? Look, the Edwardians and the Victorians didn't just build more houses. They more than doubled housing stock in England and Wales and Scotland between 1851 and 1911. That is more than that was from 3.8 million homes to 8.9 million homes in that period of time. Can we double that today? Like, it's going to be a different challenge to do that in today's time for a number of reasons. So before the 1950s, the average house had a plot size of 913 square meters, but homes built over the next 50 years had an average plot size of less than a third of that, at 268 square meters. You just see them old Victorian, that's why people do HMOs and split these into flats, because they was ginormous. But look, meanwhile, even terrace homes got smaller, and the pre-1850s terrace had a plot size of 278 square meters, but over the next 5 decades, that fell to 147 square meters. So you can see that's making them smaller and smaller so I can produce more and more. But look, the final part of the jigsaw was wages going up. The average house price declined 23% between 1884 and 1911, a slower 0.4% a year and a grind down, whereas wages went up 90%, which sounds a lot, but it was only 1.1% annually. So the wages were going up, more properties being produced. And look, the Victorian area saw a building boom as towns and cities expanded and transport was improved, delivering to the suburbs, and 2 world wars were separated by private rented sector housing boom in the 1930s. Building sector, home building, then boomed in decades after World War II. And you can see by this chart, you can see the growth of how many properties. So this is by the thousand on this chart. So we can see 150,000 around 1876, dipped off around World War I, then boomed up afterwards, and in World War II dipped off again, and then after World War II we went on a building spree, and the government was building a lot of them homes before World War II, private rented sector, but after World War II the government built a lot, so it's more in their means to be able to do that. It was building, look, you can see between 300 and nearly 400,000 properties a year. Look, France and Germany have got a very similar size economy to us, and even through COVID, they both built over 300,000 properties per year, and they've got the same sort of economies, same sort of population. So basically, the UK government have not been prioritising this. We could have been doing this and haven't been. They've done it in the past, but they're not doing it now. And this is the main reason behind the squeeze we're having at the moment. But look, even though they're building a lot, we was a nation of renters back then. And even in 1918, when the house prices have fallen pretty much for 70 years, more than 3/4 of people rented. We was a nation of renters. We've got this whole thing around, come on, we're home owners. And that's just romantic, but that really shifted in Thatcher's era. So look, after the private rented sector building boom in the 1930s of 2.7 million homes in the public sector from 1950s, 60s and 70s, but it was also second half of the 20th century when home ownership took off. And as I said, that was when Margaret Thatcher done the right to buy and all this thing. The right to buy scheme was great to let people own their homes. But back then, when you started in the 70s, the average times multiplier of the income was like a 3 times multiplier, even in London. But then since then, affordability has deteriorated as higher price demand and bigger deposits have caused people to be unable to secure mortgages. And ownership has declined to 63%. So it's on the decline ownership at the moment. And that's just an affordability thing. This is why I talk about this all the time. I'm doing a workshop tonight at the time of recording this. I've got many workshops coming up. So in the description, you'll see a link from my workshop that explains into this and the massive opportunity we've got in the North at the moment, because the affordability is not, this is an average. 8 times multiplier of income is an average of the UK. That's not the whole of the UK. That's averaging out, including London. So you look at parts in the north, even in Manchester, it's not an 8 times multiplier yet. And it's a great city, and these cities are getting infrastructure. Look at the greatest wealth transfer video I've done here, and this will give you a little bit more insight around that, where the wealth transfer is at the moment and the opportunity in the north. Or join me on my workshop. So again, here's another chart showing the difference between price per earnings ratio And look, from the 1960s until the 1990s, there wasn't a massive difference, and then it really spiked between the north and the south. And what happened is industries left the UK and it became a central business hub. As I said, I'll go into depth on this on my free workshop, how to invest in BRI property remotely, because there's a great opportunity coming back to the north at the moment now. But as I said, I won't go in depth through that now. But what's going to happen now? What are we going to do? Are we going to now all of a sudden build loads of homes and drive the prices down for the next 70 years? And look, from this article, they're saying, look, the UK heavily mortgaged consumer would struggle to cope with 50 years of falling prices, which they would. And it says in here, it would be political suicide whoever decided to do that. I don't think any government's brave enough to try and do that myself personally. So don't panic. I'm not stopping my deals. I'm still buying, and I don't believe we are going to get that same decline. And the reason I don't believe that is because we're in a different time. Exactly that. There's more people got mortgages, more own ownership today. There's more debt in society than there is. We're at the end of a different debt cycle. We've got technology. There's loads of different factors to play in. The past does give you a good indication of the future, but it's not an exact story of what's going to go again, you know. So again, when we hit the last shift, when the UK was a leading industrial revolutionary leaders in the world and America took over, because they was a cash-rich country. At the moment, the biggest country probably battling for world leadership power is China, but they've got their own economic problems going on with their property market, and they're not as cash-rich as America was when they took over from us. So we're in different times. Although you could get an indication from the price, we're in very different times now. So this article goes on to say, look, the best hope is rising wages, but a return to better wage combined with more houses built and lower property inflation would help the situation, albeit a caveat, because higher wages often mean a robust economy and potentially stronger property markets. So it's just self-fulfilling prophecy. It keeps on going around. No matter what the governments do to try and slow this down, it kind of feeds into itself. And the amount of sentiment that's in the property market is massive, especially because a large proportion of people are homeowners now. But they had in this article, the elephant in the room here is interest rates. He points that recent Bank of England working paper that concluded almost all the rise in house prices relevant to incomes in 1985 to 1918 was down to sustained decline in real interest rates. So it's cheap borrowing. It says on here as well, cheap money equals to more expensive homes. And then on the basis as well, we probably can't double the housing stock and don't want much smaller homes to avoid money getting much cheaper. Like the banks have really just got to be stronger on this interest rate. But are the government's brave enough to do that? As I said, a big sentiment is tied to the economy. The reality is, I don't know. I've not got the answers. This is just my opinion. I feel we will slow this down. Do I feel it's sustainable to keep on getting double growth? No, I do not feel that's sustainable to keep on doubling up everywhere. But I still think there's pockets that's left to grow, and especially in line with wages and the responsible lending the banks have been doing recently. So as I said, join me on my next workshop, how to invest in BRI property remotely. If you do not live in one of these areas that can work with that, we'll show you how to find the areas. We'll show you how to find the deals, find the funding, and then manage the refurbs. And technology enables you to do it from anywhere today. Is our massive friend, and this is the big difference between now and it was in the 1800s, is tech and the world being more globalized, and the fact that we can go on Alibaba and all the stuffs directly from China today and have it on our doorstep in weeks. It's just a different landscape than it was in the past. We do want to use the past to measure the future, but we can't 100% measure it. And as we go through different eras though, so when we went from the agricultural revolution into the industrial revolution, things massively changed. The labour force went from working in the fields to working in the factories, but less labour force was needed because of steam engines and the industrial revolution. And we're going through a big change at the moment with tech and AI, so we've got to keep on evolving. That's why I always say evolve your ideas to live on your terms. So look, if you are here still at the end of this right now, thank you very much. People like you are really helping this channel grow. Please, if you've not done it already, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you're notified every time we do these videos. Please give it a thumbs up if you didn't do it earlier on. No jokes aside, all jokes aside, and no joke, it does help the algorithms and it does help my ego. It does make me feel a little bit better and it makes it feel worthwhile me doing these. But remember, my why is to live on my terms. My mission is to help as many people live on their terms using property or financial education or mindset as a vehicle to do that. So please spread this out, spread this message, tag somebody in you think they'll find this useful. And if you don't evolve your ideas, you'll never live on your own terms. So evolve your ideas, live on your own terms, and have an amazing day.